Today we're diving into a media takeover that could reshape Britain's entire political conversation, a massive weapons deal that's redrawing military alliances across two continents, a tech revolution that's about to hit every smartphone in your pocket, and a lawsuit so audacious it's making international headlines. And yes, I've saved the most intriguing twist for the very end of this episode, so stick around. I spent years inside one of those big-name media organizations, the kind everyone recognizes. I watched stories get bent, facts get cherry-picked, narratives get shaped to fit whatever agenda was being pushed that week. I walked away from all that because I couldn't stomach it anymore. Now I work alone, I answer to nobody, and I tell you what's actually happening without the spin. That's the difference between being independent and being on someone's payroll. Before we go further, if you find value in what I do here, hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. And listen, I want to be real with you for a moment. What we do here, the fact-checking, the verification, making sure we're not spreading fake news or jumping on rumors, it takes serious work. If you're able to sponsor the channel, even a small contribution helps us keep this operation running and keeps the truth flowing. I mean that from the heart. And please watch all the way to the end, because what's coming at the finish is genuinely the most fascinating piece of this entire puzzle. So let's talk about what just happened in British media, because this isn't just some business transaction. This is a seismic shift in who controls the information millions of people consume every single day. Daily Mail, one of the most powerful conservative voices in Britain, just dropped £500 million, that's 654 million US dollars, to acquire the Telegraph. Think about what that means for a second. Two of the biggest players in right-leaning British journalism are now under one roof, under one ownership structure, with all the influence and agenda-setting power that comes with it. This deal didn't happen in a vacuum. It came through a multinational consortium called Redbird IMI, and right now antitrust regulators are watching this like hawks, because what's emerging here is a genuine media giant. We're talking about an entity that now owns Metro, iPaper, New Scientist, and The Telegraph, all wrapped into the DMGT structure. The scale of influence we're discussing here isn't theoretical. This is the kind of power that shapes political debates, that moves public opinion, that sets the entire national conversation. But here's where things get even more intriguing. Thousands of journalists are sitting in newsrooms right now waiting to find out what this means for their jobs, for editorial independence, for whether the stories they write will still be their own or whether they'll be filtered through a new corporate lens. The questions swirling around this aren't just about business, they're about transparency, about who gets to decide what news matters, about how subscription economics will change, about digital transformation, and what happens when you concentrate this much media power in so few hands. Now, you might be wondering, why does this matter to you if you're not in Britain? Well, let me tell you, because what happens in British media doesn't stay in British media. These outlets have global reach, they influence international coverage, they set precedents that ripple across the Atlantic and beyond. This is a historic moment for the entire media landscape, and the decisions being made right now in boardrooms and regulatory offices will echo for years. And we're just getting started because this is only the first story. While media moguls are reshaping information flows, military strategists are reshaping the balance of power in the skies. Britain and Turkey just finalized a deal that's making defense analysts sit up and take serious notice. We're talking about 20 Eurofighter Typhoon jets heading to Turkey in a contract worth $10.7 billion, that's 8 billion British pounds. This isn't just about airplanes. Turkey is getting access to some of the most advanced European missiles on the market, Meteor and Brimstone weapon systems that will make their air force a dominant regional player. Here's what makes this deal so significant. Germany had been blocking this for years, vetoing any sale of Eurofighters to Turkey over political tensions and human rights concerns. That veto just got lifted, and suddenly the entire equation changed. Britain is now positioned as a key NATO player, creating 20,000 jobs in its aerospace sector, while simultaneously strengthening its geopolitical leverage in the Middle East. But if you think that's the whole story, you haven't been paying attention to the deeper currents here. Remember when Turkey got kicked out of the F-35 program by the United States? That wasn't just a diplomatic slap. That was Washington telling Ankara, you don't get our most advanced hardware because you bought Russian defense systems. Turkey didn't just sit there and take it. They pivoted hard, and now they're building their own indigenous fighter program while simultaneously shopping for European alternatives. This Eurofighter deal is Turkey saying, fine, we'll find our own path, and we'll become a regional military powerhouse while we're at it. The strategic realignment happening here is massive. Britain gets industrial jobs, export revenue, and influence over a critical NATO ally. Turkey gets modern air superiority capabilities and reduces dependence on American military hardware. And the rest of us get to watch as the traditional post-Cold War military alliances start reshaping themselves in real time. This is about sovereignty, about leverage, about who controls the skies and who gets left behind. Don't go anywhere, because we're about to shift gears into something that's going to affect every single one of you watching this. Starting in January 2025, every smartphone and electronic device sold in the European Union must have a USB-C port. That's not a suggestion. That's the law. Apple's proprietary Lightning connector, the one they've been milking for accessory revenue for over a decade, done. Finished. The era of manufacturer-specific charging ports is over, at least in Europe, and the ripple effects are going to be felt worldwide. Now, on the surface, this sounds like a consumer win, right? Universal chargers, less electronic waste, simplicity, and yes, those are real benefits. But let's dig a little deeper into what's actually happening here. The European Union just told some of the most powerful tech companies on the planet, including Apple, you will comply with our standards or you will lose access to our market. That's regulatory muscle being flexed in a way we haven't seen before. Brussels is essentially saying, we control the rules of the game, and if you want to sell to 450 million Europeans, you play by our terms. Analysts are predicting that within 12 months, older devices with proprietary ports will vanish from store shelves entirely. Manufacturers aren't going to produce two different versions for different markets when they can just standardize globally. So even if you're in the US or Asia or anywhere else, you're going to feel this change. The accessory market is about to undergo a massive shift. Third-party cable makers, adapter manufacturers, everyone in that ecosystem is recalibrating right now. But here's the question nobody's really asking loudly enough. Is this about consumer protection and environmental responsibility, or is this about the EU demonstrating it can impose its will on global corporations? Maybe it's both. Maybe the motivations don't matter as much as the outcome. Either way, we're watching regulatory power reshape technology in real time, and that's a pattern we're going to keep seeing more of. Stay with me, because the economic picture we're about to discuss makes all of this feel even more urgent. Europe is facing an employment crisis that isn't getting nearly enough attention in international headlines. Unemployment in the United Kingdom just hit 5%. France is sitting at 7.6%. Germany, usually the economic powerhouse, is at 3.9%. Across the entire European Union, 13.2 million people are without work. That's 6% of the population. Let those numbers sink in for a moment, because behind each percentage point are real people struggling to pay rent, to feed their families, to maintain any sense of economic security. The crisis isn't evenly distributed either. Young people are getting hammered with unemployment rates that are genuinely alarming in some regions. Traditional industries are contracting, budgets are being squeezed, and the wealth gap keeps widening. Political parties across the spectrum are arguing about solutions, but so far, the policy responses have been inadequate at best. You've got austerity advocates on one side saying cut spending, and you've got social program defenders on the other saying invest more, and meanwhile, millions of people are stuck in the middle with no paycheck. This isn't just about statistics. This is about social stability. When unemployment stays high for extended periods, you get political instability, you get protests, you get populations voting for radical change because the status quo isn't working for them anymore. We've seen this movie before in history, and it never ends well. The question is whether European leaders recognize the urgency here before things spiral further. And speaking of spiraling, let me tell you what's happening with defense spending, because this is where things get really interesting. With the United States pulling back on military aid commitments, France and Britain are having serious conversations about forming a new European defense union. Britain just announced it's cutting foreign aid from 0.5% of GDP down to 0.3% so it can redirect that money into military spending. The EU is pouring additional billions into migration control and strategic defense priorities. In the British Parliament, they're openly discussing a defense budget deficit that's exceeded £15 billion. £15 billion. That's not pocket change. What we're witnessing here is Europe being forced to confront its own security reality. For decades, European nations could afford generous social programs partly because they were relying on American military umbrella protection. That umbrella is looking less reliable now, and the costs of independence are becoming painfully clear. Building up a credible defense capability from scratch, or at least significantly upgrading what exists, requires massive investment. Investment that has to come from somewhere, which means cuts elsewhere, or tax increases, or deficit spending, all of which are politically explosive. The long-term strategic question is whether Europe can actually pull this off. Can a continent that struggled with political unity on everything from fiscal policy to migration suddenly coordinate on defense in a meaningful way? The skeptics say no. It's too complicated, too many competing interests. The optimists say necessity will force cooperation that wasn't possible before. I'll tell you what I think. The truth is probably somewhere in the middle, and we're going to find out in real time over the next few years. But before we wrap this up, I promised you I saved the most interesting part for the end, and here it is. Donald Trump just announced he's suing the BBC for up to $5 billion. Yes, you heard that correctly. $5 billion. The former president is going after the British Broadcasting Corporation over a Panorama documentary, claiming they distorted his statements and damaged his reputation. The BBC has already pulled the film from broadcast and issued an apology, but they're also saying they won't accept defamation claims, and they're prepared to fight this in court. Now let's unpack what's actually happening here, because this is about so much more than one lawsuit. This is about a former and possibly future American president weaponizing litigation against a foreign media organization. This is about testing the limits of press freedom across international borders. This is about using the threat of massive financial damages to intimidate journalists and news outlets into self-censorship. Whether you love Trump, hate Trump, or fall somewhere in between, the implications of this lawsuit are significant for everyone who cares about independent journalism. If Trump wins, or even if he just makes the process painful enough, what message does that send to other media organizations thinking about critical coverage of powerful figures? What happens to investigative journalism when the potential cost of getting something wrong, or even being accused of getting something wrong, is bankruptcy-level damages? And here's the twist. The American legal system's approach to defamation is different from Britain's. The international jurisdiction questions here are genuinely complex, and the precedent this case could set is unpredictable. The BBC is in an impossible position. Apologize too much, and you look weak and you validate the criticism. Fight too hard, and you risk catastrophic financial consequences and years of legal warfare. Meanwhile, Trump gets to dominate headlines, play the victim of media persecution, and potentially extract either money or a chilling effect on future coverage. This is 4D chess being played with the credibility of journalism itself as the stakes. And we're all going to be watching how this plays out, because the outcome matters for press freedom everywhere. So let's bring this all together. We started with a media consolidation that concentrates information power in Britain. We moved through a defense deal that's reshaping military alliances. We covered a technology regulation that's Europe asserting control over global corporations. We examined an employment crisis that's threatening social stability. We discussed defense spending, forcing Europe towards strategic independence. And we finished with a lawsuit that could redefine the boundaries of press freedom across borders. Every single one of these stories is connected by the same underlying theme. Power is shifting. Institutions are being tested. The old rules and assumptions that governed the post-Cold War world are breaking down, and new arrangements are being forged in real time. Whether it's media ownership, military hardware, technology standards, economic policy, or legal warfare, we're watching the architecture of global systems being rebuilt around us. And the people making these decisions, they're not asking for your permission. They're not waiting for consensus. They're moving, and the rest of us are trying to keep up. If this breakdown helped you understand what's really going on behind the headlines, do me a favor and hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and if you're able to support us financially, please consider sponsoring. What we do here matters because someone needs to be connecting these dots without an agenda, without corporate pressure, without towing anyone's party line. That someone is us, and we can only keep doing it with your support. Until next time, stay informed, stay skeptical, and keep asking questions.